All right, so we'll start up with any questions I can answer based on what we've covered till now. All right, seems like no questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick recap. Just want to make sure we all are on the same page. And if there are no further questions, I'll start with the next topic. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to end up creating a BRD, which is business requirements document. And the goal for this BRD is it identifies the current business problem, it identifies the proposed solutions, the systems impacted, it identifies the systems impacted, any assumptions or dependencies, and also talks about the most important thing, which are the business requirements, which are nothing but the goals of the project. So once the BRD is defined, the next thing that happens is project manager creates a project charter, and then pretty much your SDLC is initiated. Now the first phase of SDLC is requirements gathering. Although it says gathering requirements, you ideally never start gathering requirements right from day one. The first thing you want to do is you want to understand the as is business. And how do you do that? You do two things. You want to read existing business documents, and you want to understand the current system in a sandbox environment. So once you do this, you speak the same language as the business does, and you are pretty much ready to start gathering requirements. So this is where we had stopped. So any questions I can answer within this? All right, sounds like a no. So what I'm going to do now is the next thing that we want to learn is the most important thing, which is gathering requirements. So the question is, how do we gather requirements? So the answer to that is we gather requirements via a session which is known as a JAD session. And JAD stands for Joint Application Development. So that's how we gather requirements. We gather requirements via JAD session. So let's write down the definition of a JAD session. A JAD session is a brainstorming session used to gather requirements and is participated by SMEs, BA team, a senior developer, and a system architect. So it's a brainstorming session. So what do you understand by the word brainstorming?
Rough, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Everybody's throwing ideas out there.
All right. What were you saying, Krupa?
I mean, just like a rough point notation. I mean, that's what I call brainstorming session.
Rough point notation? Not really. So pretty much brainstorming is you want to speak up your mind. If we are discussing something and if you think of something, you don't have to limit that idea just only to your thoughts. You have to say it out. So the goal is you take one business requirement in the JAT session, and all the SMEs are supposed to talk or say their thoughts in terms of how should this be done in the system. And you don't really have to worry if your idea gets rejected, right? It's not the problem. So the goal is you speak your mind without the thought of your idea getting rejected. And then pretty much you as a team collectively select the best possible option or the best possible solution to that business requirement. So that's a brainstorming session. Now let's understand who all are involved in that brainstorming session. So we have the SMEs in that session. So why do I need SMEs? I need SMEs because they are the source of my business requirements. We have the BA team in the chat session. Why do I need the BAs? Because we are the recipient of the JAT session. We are the recipient. We are responsible for gathering the requirements. We are the ones who schedules these JAT sessions. So we are an absolute must. So the question I have is, why do I need a senior developer, and why do I need a system architect in this JAT sessions? I need SMEs because they give the requirements. I need BAs because we gather the requirements. However, not sure why do I need an architect and a developer in the JAT session. Anyone?
Because they know the system better than BAs does or SMEs does. For example, if they have to develop something for just as simple as Python, a BA or SMEs might not be aware of all the codes possible in Python.
All
but
right.
The developer must be aware of them.
Okay. So they help us to identify dash of the requirements. Can you help me complete the blank? So a system architect or a developer, they help us identify the dash of the requirements. What is that dash?
Priority?
Nope. How would they know what the priority is?
Feasibility.
What kind of feasibility?
It's financially cost effective to do it, and it's technically possible to code it.
Exactly. So most importantly, they help us identify the technical feasibility of the requirements. So let me give you an example of what do we understand by technical feasibility of a requirement. So I'm just trying to go back to the same example that we did for the case study for this life insurance. Okay. So I'm assuming, let's say that the very first thing they'll have to do is they'll have to create an account in this system and they register. Now let's assume that this life insurance company has a rule that we'll only able to offer you life insurance when we'll only offer you life insurance if your current age is less than 65 years. So how do you ensure that you're not allowing the applicants to enter applications that are ineligible to apply. So how would you filter those people at the time of their application?
So like the senior developer or the system architect would have to write a code in which it filters, or I don't know.
So I want to say that let's say I'm trying to apply for a life insurance policy, but then if my current age is more than 65, the system will just not allow me to submit an application. That is the ask. So how should this be done in the system?
So shouldn't we have to put something in there that they have to put their date of birth, no? So that way.
Exactly, right? So we'll have a field called date of birth. So when they enter the date of birth, the system will calculate the current age. And if the current age is equal to or more than 65, we do not want them to proceed further. So now they wanted to catch this at the time of registration when they try to register for this life insurance portal. So this registration page had 10 fields on it. So I'm just showing you a sample registration page. Something like this. And we can also assume that there was a field for date of birth on this page, along with what we see here. Now, what the business wants is that they wanted to keep date of birth as the very first field on the top. So when the moment they select the date of birth and they go to the next field, the requirement was the system should be able to calculate the current age. And if the current age is less than 65, allow them to complete further. But if their current age is equal to or more than 65, we don't want them to be entering this field. And then we click register and we then tell them that you're not eligible for this. So they wanted to make it smart. So when they would propose that I need to do something like this, the BA would say, all right, we can do that. But let's say if there's a system architect sitting there or a senior developer, they would raise a hand. I'm just giving you this as an example. And this would happen in the year 2006, 2007, when this was not possible. So they would raise their hand and say, you know what, currently we're not using AJAX calls. AJAX is a technology that helps you validate things on the fly. So they may say, you know what, we're not using AJAX calls right now. So we may not be able to just validate the moment I get out of the field, whether it's valid or not. And we would actually have to wait until they click a button. And when they click the button, that's what is going to trigger the validations. We don't have capabilities of validating as soon as they get out of the field. So they said we cannot do that. Now, in today's world, can you think of a field that does such validations? The moment you come out of the field, they'll let you know whether it's valid or not. Anything that you can recollect from your experience?
Is it the email address?
The email address for what?
Oh no, as soon as we get out of the email address, I don't remember the site I went to, but I was typing gmail.com and by mistake I pressed M twice and it did not accept it. So
Perfect. So that's a classic example. Or the easiest and the most simplest that I recollect is when you try to create a Gmail ID and when you try to enter the preferred ID you want and you go to the next field, it simply directly says whether it's valid or not. It does not ask you to enter your password, re-enter your password, click submit, and then say it's invalid. The moment you tab out of a Gmail ID field when you're trying to register for a new Gmail ID, it'll just validate on the fly. However, in this case, the architect says, you know what, we cannot do that. They'll have to enter all the fields because the only time we can validate is when they click the button. That's when we'll have to validate. Now the business says, you know what, I really don't want to do that because I don't want them to be entering 10 or 12 fields and then they click register and then we let them know that they're not eligible. It's just a bad experience. So the architect says, unless you click a button, we cannot work, and the SMEs does not want that. So what is a good solution to this? Because the only trigger is the clicking of a button to validate the data fields. So how can you solve this? Just to have a win-win situation and make sure that the business is happy as well as you're meeting the technical limitations of the system.
Have another button saying next after their age or date of birth.
Exactly, right? So you could break the entire page into 2 pages. On the first page, the only question you want to ask is, please enter your date of birth. And you'd have an option to continue. And the moment they enter the date of birth and continue, you validate the current age. If the current age is less than 65, you display them the remainder of the fields. If the current age does not meet the criteria, you show them a hard stop. So that's how this could be resolved. So this is an example of a kind of a technical feasibility that these technical people can help us with. Because SMEs may not know this, BA would definitely not know this. So we need those people to be with us to help us identify those limitations. Now, within the BA team in the JAT session, we play 2 different roles in the JAT session. One of the BA plays the role of a facilitator, and the other BA plays the role of a scribe. Any idea who a facilitator is versus who a scribe is?
A facilitator kind of moderates the meeting, makes sure everything is staying on point and on track. And a scribe, I guess from the name, is someone that takes notes.
That is correct. So a facilitator normally is a senior business analyst. And the role of a facilitator is to ensure, they facilitate, the moderate the JAT session. So if you're meeting everyone for the very first time, you introduce everyone. A facilitator will review the goals and objectives of the JAT session. And the most important aspect of a facilitator is making sure that the discussion is going as per the agenda or as per the goals and objectives of the JAT session. More often than not, what happens is that you just tend to digress away from the main agenda. And you start talking about things which are not relevant to that JAT session. So a very important part of the facilitator is to ensure the right questions are being asked and it's going in the right direction. So that's what a facilitator does. The next role is of a scribe. So again, scribe is a business analyst, and the role for them when they work as a scribe in that JAT session is they want to document the meeting minutes. So meeting minutes are nothing but the requirements that you have finalized in the JAT session. Now, let's say you're trying to discuss 5 potential solutions. You don't want to document all the 5 potential solutions. You want to wait until a requirement has been finalized, because that's what goes in your notes. And when you start writing your requirements document, may it be the FRDs or the use case or the user story, you end up creating those requirements, documenting those requirements by looking at the notes that you captured in these JAT sessions. Any questions?
Just clarifying, we are only documenting the finalized decisions of those meetings, not
Yes.
other ones.
Yeah, you don't want to discuss. So when you're doing brainstorming, right, you'll discuss so many different ideas. And out of those different ideas, you're only going to select one as the best solution, and that becomes your requirement. So you never want to write everything that was discussed, because then you are at the risk of documenting wrong requirements, which were never requirements in your FRD. All right. Now, the next question that you want to document an answer for is, the question is, how do you conduct a JAT session? So let's write this down. The question is, how do you conduct a JAT session? All right, so the first point of the answer is, before a few days of the JAT session, before a few days of the JAT session, I shall create a JAD session agenda and send it across to the JAD participants. All right, so underneath this point, we want to also document the things we will include in the agenda. So what are the things you would include when you create an agenda? So let's do an inventory of all those line items. So the first thing you have is you have the meeting title. It's the name of the meeting. Next point is meeting date. That's the date that you plan to meet. Next, meeting time. A typical JAT session would be roughly 1 to 2 hours. You really want to not have longer sessions because SMEs, not only SMEs, right? Everyone tends to get inefficient. People tend to get saturated. So pretty much 1 to 2 hours, good enough for a JAT session. Just as an FYI, you should be aware of this term, which is a lockup session. Lockup session. So you might hear at times, rarely at work, saying, let's do some lockup sessions. What do you think lockup sessions are? What does the name suggest, lockup session? So when you do a lockup session, it means you start your session in the morning, let's say 9 in the morning, and you complete your session at 5 in the evening. It's an all-day session. So you're trying to suggest in these sessions is everyone's locked up all day in the room with each other. So that's a lockup session. Again, not very common form of sessions because not very efficient after a few hours. The next thing you would include in the agenda is location. So you want to identify which conference room are we planning to meet. Next, participants. So you are going to add all the invitee names in this. Open questions. What do you understand by this term, open questions?
Is it answering the common questions a participant might have?
No. This is an agenda, right? So why do I add open questions? Anyone else? All right, let me give you an example or a hint. So these are the open questions we have till now. What does that mean? So you might have met SMEs for a JAT session, and you might have asked them some questions. However, they were unable to answer those questions, and they go into the list of open questions. They would have said, you know what, let me do some research and we can talk about it next time we meet. So you want to make sure that you don't forget them, and you want to remind SMEs via an agenda that, you know what, you still owe us answers to these open questions that we asked you in the last session, for which you did not have an answer for. So they are your open questions. Ideally, what you would also be doing is you could also maintain a spreadsheet of all the open questions that you have, so that you have a good inventory of open questions that still needs to be answered. And then the last thing, and the most important thing, is the goals and objectives. So where do these goals and objectives of the JAT session come from? Where do the goals and objectives of the JAT session come from? I think you should be able to answer this. How do I identify what am I going to be discussing in today's JAT session?
From the BRD.
All right. What part of the BRD?
Requirements,
What kind of requirements?
the changes to be made, or
So
Business
one of those
requirements.
exactly. So they are known as business requirements. So if I open up the BRD, so what happens is, for the first JAT session, you will meet the SMEs. We know who SMEs are? Subject matter experts. So for the first JAT session, you will meet the SMEs from the digital profile management team. And you'll say, you know what, in this JAT session, we want to gather all the requirements related to ability to register and ability to log in. You then meet for the next JAT session where you want to gather the requirements for changing a password, retrieving a user ID. And you might as well gather this requirement as well. Now, who would you meet in the third JAT session? who would you meet in the third chat session?
Accounting department.
So you are going to meet SMEs from accounts management team. And again, you're going to take 1 or 2 requirements from this, and you'll say the goal is for us to review, is to get the details of all these requirements. And then you'll take another 1 or 2 requirements and so on. So you keep on conducting chat sessions until you understand how each of these business requirements are implemented, and you gather all the details related to them. All right, so that's what goes in the agenda of a chat session. So what I was making you write is I was making you write what are the things we include in the agenda. So we just wrote the first point of the question, how do you conduct chat session? We just wrote the first point that says before few days I'll create an agenda. Let's continue with our answer. We'll write point number 2. On the day of the chat session, on the day of the chat session, I shall introduce all the JAD participants and discuss the goals and objectives of the chat session. Next point. I shall review open questions from the previous JAD sessions if any. And the last point, I shall then start the brainstorming session and identify the following for every business requirement. I shall then start the brainstorming session and identify the following for every business requirement. So we'll have 3 points underneath. The first one is business rules. The second one is functional requirements. And the third one is UI. UI stands for anyone?
User interface.
User interface. So these are the 3 requirements we want to gather, 3 types of requirements we want to gather with respect to every business requirement we have. All right, so we want to understand what we just wrote. So we are going to first start with business rules. Anyone has an idea what are business rules? I mean, I'm sure each of you does. We all know what business rules are. So if you can give me an example of any rule for any business, I want to understand your understanding of what are business rules.
It's the way a business decides to go do things. Like let's say if some business decide only sell to business, like B2B model, some business will do business to business, business to consumer. Some business will do only business to consumer. So those are rules that is define the way the business will conduct activities.
Okay, very good. Anyone else?
The rules by which the business like the rules business follows in certain procedure, like process,
Okay.
like accounting rules. They have credit goes on this side only, debit goes on this side only, something like that.
No, because that's not business rules, right? Those are accounting principles.
Oh no, I mean just like something a business decides for itself. That was just an example.
Okay. So let's talk about, can you talk in terms of, because see, business analysis is all about IT systems, right? So ultimately, whatever business rules we talk about, they have to be implemented in the system. So can you talk about a business rule and say this is how it has been implemented in the system? Just to ring a bell, I did talk about a business rule when I started teaching this session, and I give an example of it. I hope you can recall.
The register button, they have to click on the register button in order to
So what's the rule here? Clicking the register button is a rule, or what's the rule?
No, not the register button, but the rule is that it's not going to identify or show the error unless and until a button is clicked. Or
So that is a technical constraint.
The rule is they only sell to 65 age of 65 or lower. They don't sell.
Exactly. So that is the rule, right? That will only issue you insurance if your age is less than 65 or not. So in these JAT sessions, the SMEs will talk about the rules that they have related to those requirements. So what you need to do then is you need to be able to ensure that you are able to implement these rules via the requirements in the system. So your system that you're creating should follow these rules, and it should not violate these rules. How would have that life insurance system violated the rule? If what is the check that we would have not made, then it would have violated the rule. That is, if we would have forgotten to calculate the current age, then the rule would be violated, right? So we have to ensure that whatever rules are there, we entertain them in the system. Can you talk about any such other business rules that you can think of based on the current job that you do? All right. Any business rules that you can think of related to Amazon? That should be easy. That should not be difficult.
Free 2-day shipping for Prime customers.
Exactly. Free 2-day shipping for a Prime customer. So on the website, they always will show an option of a 2-day shipping if there's a Prime customer. Another rule is if you are a student, you get 6 months of membership free for Prime. So if you enter an email address, which is an educational email, you get 6 months of Prime. So the system has been coded in such a way that it gives them all the Prime benefits for 6 months. And then it offers them the Prime membership at a 50% discount. Let's talk about finance. There is a rule in finance that when you're depositing cash, and if the value is $10,000 or more, you have to fill up XYZ form. So how do you ensure this rule in the system? How would you write your requirement? What kind of logic would you write in your requirement to ensure that this rule is taken care of?
So if you're depositing, are you referring to then let's say the banker, not the customer?
Right. No,
banker?
not for the, yeah, this rule is for in the system, right? That would be used by the teller to deposit that cash.
Right. So then there will be, when the teller keys in the amount, it will automatically, it's $10,000 or more, it will automatically give a message.
Perfect. You're missing one thing in this. What is it that you're missing, that Sharon is missing here?
This deposit type is cash.
Exactly. She's missing the deposit type, right? Because if it's check, it does not have to.
Right.
So your requirements would say if deposit type is equal to cash, and if deposit amount is equal to $10,000 or more, display XYZ warning to the teller that make sure you make them fill up that form. So I hope we understand what are business rules. So let's write down the definition of business rules. So before I go there, okay, let me just make you write and then I'll ask you this question. All right, so the definition is business rules are business constraints. Business rules are business constraints and arise because of any of the following two reasons. Number one, operating procedures created by the business. Number two, regulations enforced by the government. Regulations enforced by the government.
So is it like, for example, for liquor purchase, some of the stores or the businesses have to scan the ID or check the ID?
Well, so checking the ID, if it's in most cases, right, it's about checking the ID. So yes, that's a business rule, but you really don't care as a business analyst because it's not that the system, you have to enter that ID in the system, right? Had the rule be that you need to capture the ID and before you purchase, you have to enter the data and ensure that, yes, it's over 18. And you have to check the checkbox that, yes, I verified the ID, then it becomes a rule for the system. But yes, it's a business rule, but you don't really care about that because it's not as a part of the system. But the rule that I said, well, if at all, if you want to do, you could say that every time you check out, you pop up a message to the register saying, did you check the ID, is the age? But then it becomes too annoying. So only that way you could have implemented that as a part of the system. However, the example we talked about, when you deposit cash with $10,000 or more, you have to fill up the form. So you display a warning message to the teller, right, for that. So that's a rule enforced by the government, and hence bank has to follow that. When you're opening up an investment account, you have to perform an AML and KYC checks on the customer. So AML is anti-money laundering check, KYC is know your client. These rules were not enforced before 9/11. They came into play after 9/11. So again, these are business rules, or these are mandates enforced by the government that every financial organization has to adhere to. So they become your business rules. Any questions on what business rules are? All right, moving on to the next one, functional requirements. Functional requirements are the requirements which indicates a function that can be done in the system. Example, system shall allow the user to set up recurring payments. System shall allow the user to edit recurring payments. System shall allow the user to export data in an Excel spreadsheet. Any function that could be done in the system is classified as a functional requirement. And then the last is UI requirements, which are user interface requirements. Anyone knows what a user interface is?
Like a screen design, maybe?
So the screen that you see, right? That's your user interface. The layout of the data on the screen, the entire screen that you see is your user interface. So for example, this is nothing but a user interface. So when you're gathering requirements, it is important that you not only gather the requirements, but you also define the layout of the screen and you design how the screen will look like. A very, very integral part of gathering your requirements. So let us understand what are the different elements used to create a user interface. So I'm going to walk through all the different elements that we use to design a user interface. You may already know these, but nonetheless, I don't want to assume that you know this. So I want to make sure that everyone understands what each elements are, what they are called, and what their function is. So this box that you see, what is it called?
Text box.
It's called a text box. And what is the characteristic of a text box?
It lets you input text.
It allows the user to enter free form text. So whenever you want the user to enter data, this is the field that you provide. We call it a text box. What is this called that you just saw here? Or this, the more traditional way?
Drop-down menu.
It's called a drop-down menu. What is the characteristic of a drop-down menu?
It gives you different options or quantities if you wanted to change it, like saying checkout. If you wanted more than one item, you could change it to one to whatever numeric value they have available.
Nope. I'm talking about a drop-down.
You can only select from the options available.
Exactly. So in a drop-down, it allows the user to have multiple options that they can select from. Now the question is, why can't I provide a text box and why do I have to provide a drop-down? What would have happened if I would have provided a text box?
It's at the end of the day when they're trying to recover the data. It's kind of, I don't know, the filtering of it. I don't know. I know it, but I don't know how to transform that into words.
That's okay. All right. So let me do. So there's a field where you have to select state or a value for state. What you could do is you could provide a drop down to the user, or you could simply provide a text box to the user. So if I were SME, I would have selected this option and I would have rejected this option. Why?
Because people will make typing mistake, will type a state that doesn't exist in a country and stuff like that.
Exactly, right? So whenever you know that there is only one, the user can only select an option from these options, you rather just ask them to select one. The moment you allow them to type, what will they do? They'll create bad data. Someone will type completely, they'll write New Jersey, they'll just type entire New Jersey. Someone will just say NJ. Someone will put a space between New and Jersey. Someone will just put together. So what happens is your data becomes corrupt. It's bad data in the system. You don't want to do that. Plus they'll have spelling mistakes, they'll enter, and you'll give them error messages when they submit data. So the whole purpose of creating an application is you want to design an application which is smart and which produces least amount of errors when the user tries to process the data. And what is one single reason the user encounters data is the moment they start typing, they start entering bad data. So you allow them to enter less data and you allow them to select more things. And that's a smart application. Or that's, we know what a text box is. We know what a drop down is. What are these?
Radio buttons.
They are radio buttons. And what are these?
Checkboxes?
So they're checkboxes. So what's the difference between radio button versus, so if I move this here, so what's the difference between these radio buttons and these checkboxes?
In radio button, you can choose only one option. In checkbox, you can choose multiple options.
So whenever you want the user to be restricted to just select one from the multiple options, you can give them radio button. When you want the user to say, yes, I want to add a flight, as well as I want to add a car, you can give them checkboxes. So you can, a checkbox is given to allow user to select one or more options. Had the SMEs of Expedia said that while they're booking a hotel, they could either only add a flight or they could either only add a car, then you could have given them a radio button because you only want to restrict the user to select one option. But when you want them to select one or more options, you can give them a checkbox. Now, if I did not want to use a radio button for gender, what other UI element could I have selected instead of a radio button?
Drop down?
Yes, I could have used a drop down and it does the same function. Then what is this?
Hyperlink?
They are hyperlink. That's a hyperlink. And what is the characteristic of a hyperlink?
Open to another window.
So when you click on it, something happens. So that's a hyperlink. What are these? This, or this?
From where they're going to take it to the next stage.
Correct. But I'm asking the name of the UI element. We are discussing the names of the UI element.
Command button.
It's known as a command button. Command. It's called a command button. What's the characteristic of a command button? What's the characteristic of a command button? What is its function?
It executes a code or command depending on the data entered.
Yes, so it does not execute a code, it executes a function, right? It executes a command. So it depends, when you click on it, whatever the business says it should do, it will do. So whenever you click on it, it triggers some action. And what action is triggered? Whatever the SMEs say, we can make it work. So the functionality of a command button is exactly the same as the functionality of which other UI element. When you click on it, it triggers something. It's exactly the same as a hyperlink. So you click on it, it does something. What will it do? Whatever you want it to do, we can make it happen. All right, so that's all the different UI elements we have. So just want to do a basic inventory of the different UI elements we talked about. So we have a text box. We have a drop down, also sometimes known as a drop box, also known as a drop list. So there are multiple options displayed and we can select one. We have radio button where we only can select one from the multiple options. We have checkbox where we can select one or more option. We have hyperlink. So when you click on it, something happens, and we have a command button. Again, you click on it and something happens. All right, so these are the different UI elements we have. Any questions? Do we understand this? So there is a jargon that you would understand, that you should understand. You see this that I'm showing you, which discusses the layout of the page, how all the UI elements are arranged. Do you know what is this called? We as a BA, we end up creating this after the JAT session, once we understand the layout of the fields in the JAT session. Anyone knows what this is?
Wireframe.
So we refer it as a wireframe. So in other words, we call it a screen mockup or a wireframe. All right. And the last thing I want to do for this session is I want to just make sure we understand the different flavors of requirements completely. So I'm just going to write things here. So whenever we talk of requirements, requirements are of two different types. Functional requirements and non-functional requirements. I want you to take a note of this that I'm creating. Now, whenever we talk about non-functional requirements, there are four different kinds of non-functional requirements. UI requirements, performance requirements, scalability requirements, security requirements. So we know what functional requirements are. We just talked about them. Let's understand what are non-functional requirements. So let's write it down. Any requirement which does not indicate a functionality of the system, which does not indicate a functionality of the system, is a non-functional requirement. Now, if I say that the logo of Expedia should be displayed on the top right-hand corner instead of left corner, does it impact the function that the user is going to do on the site? The answer is no. It does not impact the functionality. It's the layout of the field. It's a non-functional requirement. So the first kind of a non-functional requirement that we see is the UI requirements, how the fields are laid out. It's how the screen is displayed. It's not functionality of the system. So it's referred as a non-functional requirement. The second kind of non-functional requirements are performance requirements. Any idea what are performance requirements? The name itself suggests what they are.
Like, it could be the speed, like.
So when I click transfer funds, it should not take more than half a second for the system to display me a confirmation number as to how fast the system works, performance of the system. So that's a non-functional requirement. Whether it takes half a second for the confirmation number to be displayed, or whether it takes 1.5 seconds for the confirmation number to be displayed. It does not impact the functionality of transferring funds. So it's a non-functional requirement. The next requirement is scalability requirements. Scalability refers to how much load, how much volume can the system handle. As long as there are 5,000 users using the system, it should not take more than half a second for the page to load. If there are more than 5,000 users and less than 10,000 users, it's okay for the system to take 0.75 of a second to load. So higher the load, lesser the performance. Lesser the load, better the performance. So again, it's not a functional requirement. It directly impacts the performance of the system. Before a few years, there was a website which was a national website which had scalability issues. It crashed the day it was launched. Can any one of you recall what am I talking about?
I know the story, but I don't remember the company name.
What was the story?
The story just said about it crashing. I don't remember what it was though. When you say it, I'm gonna beat myself up because I don't remember.
It was health. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it Obamacare.gov or whatever?
Yes. The day it was launched, right? Healthcare.gov, the healthcare marketplace. The day it was launched, it crashed. What happened? Why did it crash? Any reason? Any idea?
So you said the amount of people it couldn't handle.
Exactly, right? The entire USA wanted to see what that is about. So when you design any of the systems, you only design it for a certain load frame in mind. But when you have more than the desired load, what happens? The system starts working sluggish. It initially does not crash. The moment it increases the load, it just starts performance. It impacts the performance. It becomes slow. And after a while, the load becomes so much, it just cannot handle and it just crashes. So that's scalability. Again, it's a non-functional requirement. And the last kind of non-functional requirement are your security requirements. Any idea what are security requirements?
I guess making sure that the data that's put on there is basically secured.
Okay, so the ask is your database has to be secured and no one should be able to access the database if they are not authorized to access. I believe Experian, the credit reporting bureau, had an issue. Target had issue where somebody got access to the credit card numbers of the customers. So things like that. Your database has to be secured so that nobody can access that. So requirements like, I'm missing what here I meant to write, UI requirements. So requirements like performance, scalability, and security. Do you think SMEs will have an idea of what should be performance requirement, what should be scalability requirements, what should be security requirements? They would not. These are technical requirements. So you don't gather them. What are the three kind of requirements that what are the three things that you gather from the JAT session with the SMEs? Look at, yes, I was just saying, refer to the answer I made you write. How do you conduct JAT session? And look at the last point. We said for every business requirement, I identify the following things. And what are the three things you gather?
Business rules, functional requirements, and user interface requirements.
Exactly. So you gather business rules, you gather functional requirements, and you gather UI requirements. These are the three things you gather from the JAT session and nothing else. The rest of the requirements, these are technical requirements. You're not supposed to be worrying about them. System architect or someone from the technical team will end up creating those. So you don't have to really worry about them. All right, any questions I can answer? So what is going to happen is I'm going to conclude today's session here. The plan is in the next session that I'm teaching, I am going to do a simulation of a JAT session. So we are going to do a role play. I'll play the role of SME. I'll become the subject matter expert. And you all will play the role of a business analyst. And we'll do a brainstorming session. I'm going to teach you exactly how to conduct a JAT session, how to ask questions, what to ask, what not to ask. And while we do this, you'll play the role of a facilitator. At the same time, you're also going to be playing the role of a scribe. So you're going to be taking notes. Whatever the requirements I give you out of 50 things we discuss, whatever things I finalize, I would expect that you would be taking notes. And once we finish taking notes, the next thing that I'll be doing in that session is I'm going to teach you how to create your first official deliverable, which is going to be your functional requirements document. We refer it as FRD. So I'm going to type an FRD in the class so that you understand exactly how that document is created. So that's going to be the agenda for the next session. Before I close, any question related to what we covered today's class?
I'm good.
All right. Anybody else has any questions, concerns? All right. I believe no more questions. So I am going to end the session here. Thank you.